Salut YouTube and welcome back to the Not Even French YouTube channel. As you can see today, my setup is a little bit different because I'm actually in the space that I use to film for Badass Careers, which is my professional YouTube channel. And I just felt like I'm speaking about CVs, I'm in my zone of genius, putting on that sort of human resources hat of mine. And so to get into the right vibe, I am filming over on the Badass Careers side. However, I am absolutely here to speak to my Not Even French fan because today I am talking about how to write a French CV, and not just any French CV, but a compelling high-level CV that stands out in very competitive markets. Because while most of you know me, of course, from this YouTube channel, Not Even French, this was always a side hustle or side project on top of my corporate career. So I wasn't a YouTuber or blogger while I was living in France. I was pursuing a corporate career, and so I've been working for the past 10 years in human resource management and recruitment. And I myself was working for big Fortune 500 companies like the Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy Group, like L'Oreal, also tech startup, consulting, and so on and so forth. And I've also got multinational experience outside of my time in France as well. So not only have I been able to get into top tier companies like this, but I've seen time and time again thousands and interviewed the applicants coming in to companies like this as well. And I know what big top tier companies, highly selective companies are looking for in a CV, especially through my time in France. And so I know what a standout CV looks like globally and in France. And I'm really excited to share with you today some tips, tricks, strategies, and things that you can do to take your French CV to the next level if you are wanting to apply for, say, a master's program or a job in France. Just before I jump into the first point, I wanted to let you know as well that I do have a resume masterclass, resume CV, however you call it, in your corner of the world, where I go through step by step my signature methodology for crafting a badass resume or CV. This is a method that I've used with clients from all over the world, including France, and has landed them the most insane dream jobs. Because at the end of the day, while there are some country norms to take into consideration, which we'll talk through in this video for France, it's all about marketing psychology, and it's all about knowing how to package up your awesome and to brand yourself strategically. So I talk all about that in this free resume masterclass. You can check it out in the description box down below, or head to badasscareers.com/badassmasterclass to get a taster of my experience and expertise when it comes to branding yourself in your core marketing pitch, which is your CV or your resume. So definitely check that out. And otherwise, let's jump into some specific things that you need to know when you're writing a CV in France. The first thing, and this will come as no surprise to you if you know anything about the French culture, it is that aesthetics matter. They really, really matter. You will never see in France, or at least very rarely, because it just wouldn't work on the market, see a CV looking like this, looking so plain and boring and just having no personality. And what this means is that in France, you can use a little bit of color. You know, it doesn't need to be wild, but you can use a bit of navy, you can use a bit of green, you could use a bit of red. That is completely fine. I often see the most common format coming through actually being 2 columns, so having more of that aesthetic look as well, using sites like canva.com, you know, to really create a good looking, well-designed CV. It's just very important for that polished, professional, sleek look. And the use of icons is totally fine as well, like little phones beside your phone number and email icons, the little LinkedIn symbol. If you're talking about your languages, listing out your languages and putting sort of those dots which refer to your skill level and your competence in a certain area. I'm not saying they have to be these like wild visual infographic style CVs, but having a touch of aesthetic is very important and very, very common. And so I'm going to flash up on the screen, just as I'm talking here, some of the resumes or CVs that have been used for my clients who are either based in France or wanting to move to France that have gotten them into the top leading grande école or university programs in the world, so Ivy League level schools and or jobs, for example, at Christian Dior Couture. So this is the kind of look you can absolutely go for in France. It has a bit of style, it has a bit of personality. It's also incredibly uncommon for European companies to use applicant tracking systems in the way where, you know, they bring the applications in, they spit all of the information out in terms of text, and the recruiter's only looking at the plain text version. That's very common, more so in the US. And this means as well there's a little bit more of a relaxed attitude around the looks of things because they're not having to worry as much about what the ATS can and cannot process. Now, tip number 2 is in terms of the format overall for a French CV. You want to get that onto one page. I would challenge you that even if you have up to 15 years experience, to get that onto one page. Because a French CV, just like any CV or resume actually, but it should very much be the teaser trailer, not the feature film. The feature film is you in the interview. And so unless you are middle management or above senior executive level, you are going to want to make sure that it is very succinct and it is on one page. And that's challenging, it really is, but it means that you have to be discerning when it comes to which information is going to make it onto the resume first and foremost, because it doesn't have to be a whole life story, it has to be the most compelling information about you, and it challenges you to get to the point very, very quickly. Now, if we zoom into what I call the upper third of a good CV, sort of that top area, that almost headline area where you introduce yourself effectively. You've got the photo, because yeah, you need a photo on a French CV, you've got your name, you've got your contact details, and you've got that introductory profile or summary section. This upper third is super important because it's the first impression, and it's almost like that hook, that headline that allows the reader to be drawn in and want to know more. So firstly, the photo. Yes, it is very normal and expected to have a photo on a CV in France. It's how it is. They are, I guess, a little bit more relaxed in terms of the discriminatory nature of photos, or maybe have a different perspective, which is, hey, at some point they're going to meet you anyway, like shouldn't we fight the system and fight discrimination generally instead of hiding who we are until they have to meet us anyway, plus they can always stalk us on LinkedIn and see what we look like. Like, I think there's a little bit more of a relaxed attitude. It's certainly not advised against like it is in the US and New Zealand and Australia and the UK to have a photo. It's very much expected that you will have a photo on your CV. So you want to make sure that that's looking professional. It doesn't mean that it has to be a professional photo. It can obviously be taken with your phone, but something that I think looks quite sharp is that if you take that photo and then you go to remove.bg and you remove the background, you can then go to a website like canva.com, just create a 1080 by 1080 square and choose a really nice background color which blends into the rest of the color scheme of your CV, and that looks very sharp and cool as well if you crop that into a square or a circle. And I think in terms of photos in France, I like to keep them pretty simple, nothing super creative, like, you know, those agency shots where people are like, ha 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 ha, it's like black and white, but your yellow jumper is still yellow. Like, we're not talking about that level. It's not crazy. It's really just a nice, simple, professional headshot. When it comes to your contact details or information, phone, email, LinkedIn profile, hyperlinked so that they can check you out on LinkedIn. Very important. If you are not French, make sure that you have your work status on there, either saying that you have the right to work or that you are eligible for a specific visa. For example, eligible for the talent passport visa, which is a specific visa in France. More old-fashioned advice would say to put your address on there. But what people are doing now is just sort of putting a region or an arrondissement, for example, if you're in Paris. So you could put that on there, but personally, it's not make or break. I view it as quite optional. I would only put it on there if it could potentially work to your favor. Otherwise, it can be, of course, a source of discrimination. Like if you live an hour and a half away, then obviously a recruiter might pick up on that and think that it's not very favorable for your application. So I wouldn't say that's a make or break. Another thing that I've seen people put on French CVs specifically is the status of your driver's license. I would only add that if that has been a request within the job description and they've asked you to please have your full driver's license in order to apply for the job. You do not need to put your age, your marital status, or the number of children that you have whatsoever. I've seen it been done before in France. It's optional. I think it's just a giant source of discrimination and I wouldn't put that on there whatsoever. Unlike a photo, you're not going to lose any sort of brownie points for not putting that information on there. Another thing that's really important on a French CV is the profile section. So the profile section is 3 3 or 4 sentences basically summing up who you are and connecting the dots for the recruiter. It's an introduction of yourself, it's that elevator pitch. So let me give you a concrete example of one to drive the concept home. Master's qualified professional with 9 years international experience, Switzerland, France, UK, in product, project, and business management. A naturally strategic thinker, I have overseen the end-to-end delivery of 15 programs concurrently, worth upwards of $100 million, monitoring the roadmap and reporting on performance metrics. As the director/product owner, I led the conceptualization and development of the content experience for customers and prospects, identifying client needs and business opportunities. Now, I'm looking to leverage my core strengths in communication, relationship building, and product ownership into a dynamic product manager role. So it essentially is, who are you? What are you good at? Weave in an accomplishment if you can to lift that up, and then what do you want next? It is very common in a French CV to provide this introduction to yourself. What makes this one powerful? And again, a lot of these things are quite universal. It's not just about CVs in France, but what they've done here is they've analyzed what the company needs and the problems that they need solving, and they have responded to that almost in a, this is what I do really well, here's a proof point, and it's essentially saying, I could do this job, and what I want is a job just like this one. It's not selfish, it's not egocentric, it's not, I want to develop my career and I want to learn and I want to grow and I'm looking for this. It's more than that. It's more about, this is how I add value. And my next strategic career step is very much aligned to the role that you have on offer right here. When it comes to the experience section in a French CV, nothing really different here. It's going to be about the job title, the company, and the dates. You can also put the months on the dates as well, so month and year, that is the standard in France. And then when you want to put out the bullet points of your experience section, you want to, just like all resumes or CVs, you want to make sure that it's accomplishment focused and it's very much highlighting the value that you add and the impact that you have on companies. When it comes to the education section, this is very important to the French, and it shocked me to find that a master's degree, or what they call a bac plus 5, a bac plus 5, which means 5 years of study post baccalaureate, post the high school diploma, that's required for jobs in big companies. Like, if you want to get into the L'Oreals, the Chanels, the Totals, the Sanofis, if you want to get into the big French companies, a bac plus 5 or a master's degree, it's just entry level. That's like having a bachelor's degree in most countries. And so you've got to know that. And so what that means is that you want to highlight the highest level of education that you have. If you did a bachelor's degree, but you did an honours year, make sure they know you have a bac plus 4, because that's 4 years of study post your high school diploma. So you always want to be highlighting the highest possible level of education that you have. Otherwise it's going to be very, very hard to break in on a competitive market, just because the French value their education so much, and it's very cheap, if not free, to be able to study in France. So because they come from that normality, it's very common for professionals to have master's degrees, and you may stand out like a sore thumb if you don't highlight the education that you do have. Also on the education, the name of your school is very important. If your school has a ranking, if it is recognized as a top league school in any way whatsoever, you also want to put that in there, because the status of schools is also very important in the French culture. I'm also talking about corporate professional world here, but just FYI. On a French CV as well, in terms of those extra sections, again, this is really going to depend on what information is going to shift the dial for the role that you're applying for. So if you have a particular volunteer experience that is super relevant, put it on there. It's going to really depend on the role that you're going for. But in general, a couple of classic sections you're going to find on a French CV, very much languages. So languages is an absolute classic. Even if you're just a native English speaker with no other languages, just make sure that that's really clear and it's not something that you're assuming that they'll know. Highlighting your language capacity in general and showing that you can integrate into those more multicultural environments is always cool. They often also have a section called tools and software, where you draw out the more technical skills and software that you know how to use. As basic as it is, it's still there on French CVs. Microsoft Office, and naming those and saying that you know how to use PowerPoint in Word and that kind of thing. And I often see that reflected in job descriptions as well, in ads, asking for those capabilities. So reflect whatever's in the ad, make sure that it's on your CV, and you're listing out those technical hard skills, those things that you can actually do and you've been trained in, whether that's Photoshop, whether that's a certain project management software. Then of course the other sections are really up to you. You could put volunteering, you could have personal projects, you could have your interests, you could have certifications, you could highlight core strengths or career highlights and pull out just 2 or 3 things that you really want to pack a punch. It really, again, it will depend on the role that you're going for. Now the big question of course is, which language is this all in? And my rule of thumb is, if the job ad is in English, respond in English. If it's in French, respond in French. However, what I didn't really like as a recruiter, for example, would be receiving an absolutely perfect French application and the language had obviously been done by a native or a professional and the person couldn't actually speak French. So to kind of signal that, what you could do as well is send in both. Send your French CV and English CV and French cover letter and English cover letter. You obviously need to be able to do the job, right? And if it's a French language job and you don't speak French fluently, then it may not be the right fit for you. But if it says, you know, anglais nécessaire, anglais impératif, and it really goes on about the fact that English is incredibly important for the role, why not? Why not go for it and see what they say? But in this case, I would submit both and make it clear, just obviously in the languages section as well, about your level of French, so that if it is a deal breaker for them, no one wastes their time either way. You know, they don't waste theirs, you don't waste yours, and it's just really upfront as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video on the French CV. If you have any questions whatsoever, let me know in the comment section down below. I'll try to get back to them all. And otherwise, of course, if you want over 1 hour worth of goodness on resumes, on CVs more generally, how to market yourself, and this is very universal and international in perspective, but of course a lot of my professional experience was anchored in France. So the tips in this masterclass absolutely work for France, hands down. Definitely go and check out my free resume masterclass in the description box down below. Again, that's badasscareers.com/badassmasterclass if you want to check that out as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you here next week on the Not Even French YouTube channel. A bientôt!